In forgotten places where patterns hide in plain sight, where silence observes quietly, justice does not announce itself, it whispers, and every act leaves an echo. This is Whispers of Reckoning. Isaac Bell trusted numbers. Not intuition. Not rumor. Not stories told over late coffee in dim offices. Numbers. Because numbers behaved. Numbers obeyed rules. Pressure rose according to measurable gradients. Temperature shifted through predictable cycles. Storms followed atmospheric pathways mapped decades before Isaac had ever entered the profession. Or at least, that was what Isaac believed. For 15 years he had worked at the Western Atmospheric Observatory. A quiet research facility in the Nevada desert. Low buildings. Tall antennas. Miles of empty land stretching toward distant mountains. The place had been chosen specifically because nothing happened there. No cities. No industry. No noise. Just sky. The observatory existed to measure things that most people never noticed. Air pressure fluctuations. Electromagnetic disturbances. Temperature gradients across desert terrain. The kind of data that quietly shaped global climate models. Most days Isaac worked alone in the monitoring wing. Rows of monitors displayed graphs that changed slowly across hours. Tiny fluctuations. Subtle curves. Millions of data points flowing quietly through software. Isaac liked it that way. Chaos existed in politics. In markets. In human behavior. Nature was different. Nature followed rules. 3 weeks before the discovery, Isaac had been reviewing archived storm data. A routine project. The observatory had begun digitizing older atmospheric records. Some dating back more than 50 years. Most of the work involved cleaning corrupted files and standardizing measurement units. Tedious. Repetitive. Comfortable. Isaac preferred work that required patience rather than speculation. He scrolled through thousands of entries each day. Storm formation logs. Pressure maps. Satellite corrections. Most of it told familiar stories. Storms forming over the Pacific. Moving inland. Breaking apart over mountain ranges. Occasionally strengthening unexpectedly. Nothing unusual. Until he noticed a single entry. 10 years earlier. A desert thunderstorm. Small. Localized. Recorded by a mobile radar station. The storm cell had been traveling directly toward a remote highway corridor. Nothing unusual about that. Except the storm changed direction. Abruptly. A shift of nearly 40 degrees. Meteorologists had explained it in the report. Localized pressure shear. Wind gradient anomaly. Statistically possible. Statistically rare. Isaac flagged the dataset for curiosity. Not suspicion. Curiosity. He kept scrolling. 2 days later he found another. A coastal storm front. 12 years earlier. Satellite data showed the front splitting into 2 separate systems moments before reaching a heavily trafficked shipping corridor. Again the official explanation existed. Temperature inversion. Ocean pressure interaction. Statistically possible. Statistically rare. Isaac leaned back slightly. 2 rare anomalies were not unusual. Weather systems occasionally behaved unpredictably. But the direction of the split caught his attention. Both storms had shifted away from human infrastructure. Coincidence? Probably. Still, Isaac marked the dataset. By the end of the week he had flagged 8 similar anomalies. Across different decades. Different regions. Different atmospheric conditions. Each explained individually. Each statistically plausible. But when Isaac plotted the coordinates across a continental map, something strange appeared. The anomalies did not scatter randomly. They formed an arc. A faint curve stretching across geography. Isaac frowned. He recalculated. Added additional atmospheric variables. Filtered the dataset by wind shear categories. The arc remained. Barely visible. But real. He expanded the search. Old geological records. Environmental incident reports. Disaster near misses. Events where natural forces had changed direction unexpectedly. Wildfires stopping short of towns. Floodwater diverting away from settlements. Avalanches releasing hours before hikers arrived. Individually, all explainable. Collectively, something else. Isaac plotted every event he could verify. Coordinates. Dates. Atmospheric pressure levels. Human activity nearby. Then he connected the points in chronological order. The pattern emerged slowly. Not a straight line. Not a random cluster. A spiral. Not perfect. Nature rarely produced perfect geometry. But unmistakable. The events rotated across the continent. Year after year. Decision after decision. Choice after choice. Isaac stared at the map for a long time. His first instinct rejected the conclusion immediately. Correlation did not equal causation. Statistical clustering occurred frequently in large datasets. The human brain imposed patterns where none existed. He knew that. Every scientist did. Yet the spiral refused to disappear. He removed several events. The shape weakened slightly. But remained. He added more events. The spiral strengthened. Slow. Wide. Spanning decades. Isaac leaned forward. Something about the pattern bothered him deeply. Because the anomalies were not random natural events. Each one occurred within minutes of a human decision. A rescue attempt. A diversion. A warning issued. A gate opened. A door unlocked. Moments where people acted under pressure. Moments where someone chose responsibility over convenience. Isaac whispered to himself. That's impossible. Because if the pattern meant what it seemed to mean, nature was responding. Not randomly. But relationally. Pressure in the atmosphere. Pressure in water. Pressure in human choices. All part of the same system. The idea violated everything Isaac believed about scientific boundaries. Nature was measurable. Human morality was not. Yet the spiral connected both. Outside Isaac's office window the desert wind moved across sand. Antennas creaked softly against the evening sky. Inside the observatory the hall lights dimmed automatically. Most of the staff had already gone home. Isaac remained alone with the map. The spiral glowed faintly across the screen. 30 years of anomalies rotating slowly across the continent. He felt a strange tension building in his chest. Not excitement. Not fear. Recognition. As if the numbers were pointing towards something larger than the equations describing them. For the first time in his career, Isaac wondered whether numbers were revealing something he did not yet understand how to measure. And somewhere within the spiral, another event waited. Because the pattern had not stopped. It was still moving. Still forming. Still listening. The desert observatory was never truly silent. Most people imagine deserts as empty places. But emptiness has sound. Wind sliding across sand produces a low whisper that never fully disappears. Metal antenna towers vibrate softly against temperature shifts. Air conditioning systems hum inside reinforced buildings to protect delicate instruments from the relentless heat outside. At night those small sounds become noticeable. The absence of human voices amplifies them. Isaac Bell had spent 15 years listening to that quiet. He had grown comfortable inside it. Comfortable enough that most evenings he barely noticed the time passing. But tonight the silence felt different. Not louder. More attentive. The spiral map still filled the monitor in front of him. Dozens of coordinates connected by faint white lines. A slow rotation across decades. A pattern hiding beneath events that no one had previously connected. Isaac leaned forward again and zoomed out further. The spiral widened. Storm deviations. Wildfire containment shifts. Avalanche releases that occurred minutes before hikers entered danger zones. Flood diversions. Transportation accidents narrowly avoided. Individually these events belonged to different scientific disciplines. Meteorology. Hydrology. Geology. Emergency response. But Isaac had placed them all on the same map. Because the timing of each event intersected with a moment of human decision. Someone had opened a gate. Someone had chosen to stop and help a stranger. Someone had turned a vehicle around. Someone had refused to abandon responsibility. Isaac had marked those moments with a small icon beside each coordinate. Now the map looked less like a scientific dataset and more like a strange constellation of decisions. He stared at the spiral again. The pattern moved west to east across the continent over time. Then curved north. Then south again. A slow turning shape. Almost as if something were circling. Observing. Correcting pressure when it built too strongly in one place. Isaac rubbed his eyes. He needed distance. When patterns appear too clearly, scientists often distrust them. Because clarity can be deception. The brain wants order. The brain wants symmetry. It will create patterns even where none exist. Isaac had spent his entire career resisting that instinct. But the spiral did not dissolve when he removed variables. It strengthened. And that frightened him more than randomness would have. He expanded the time range. Instead of 30 years, he loaded 50. Old climate station logs began appearing across the map. Many were incomplete. Some recorded only barometric pressure and wind direction. Others included handwritten notes digitized from aging paper archives. Isaac began scanning those notes. Most entries were mundane. Routine weather descriptions. Storm paths. Temperature fluctuations. But occasionally a human sentence appeared among the numbers. One log from 1978 read, "Storm weakened unexpectedly. Fishermen returned safely." Another from 1986, "Wildfire stopped at Canyon Ridge despite heavy winds." Another from 1993, "Flash flood diverted into dry channel minutes before highway crossing." Each note had been written casually. No one suspected those moments might connect. But Isaac placed them on the map anyway. The spiral grew wider. More defined. More deliberate. His pulse began to quicken slightly. He leaned back in his chair. That can't be real. Yet the pattern remained. Not perfect. Nature never produced perfect shapes. But the curve was unmistakable. A rotating sequence of events where natural forces altered direction just after moments of human action. Almost as if the environment had responded. The idea was absurd. Physics did not include moral feedback loops. Atmospheric pressure did not measure kindness. Rivers did not care about courage. Yet Isaac's map suggested something else entirely. Pressure moved through systems. Sometimes through air. Sometimes through water. Sometimes through human behavior. And sometimes those systems intersected. The hallway outside Isaac's office creaked softly. He barely noticed. His focus remained on the spiral. He began calculating distances between events. Hundreds of miles separated many of them. Sometimes thousands. The time gaps varied. Days. Months. Years. But the rotational direction remained consistent. Each event advanced the spiral slightly forward. Like the slow movement of a clock hand. Except the clock measured choices. Isaac ran a simulation overlay. If the pattern continued at the same pace, another event should appear within the next few months. Somewhere along the next arc of the spiral. Possibly near the western interior. He highlighted the predicted region on the map. Nevada. Utah. Northern Arizona. The desert surrounding the observatory fell directly within that arc. Isaac felt a small shiver move through him. Coincidence? Probably. Yet the spiral on the screen seemed to pulse with quiet inevitability. Footsteps approached along the hallway. Slow. Measured. Not the hurried steps of researchers leaving after a long shift. These were deliberate. Steady. Isaac recognized them. The janitor. The man had worked at the observatory since Isaac's first year. No one seemed to know his exact age. Or his exact job title. Official records listed him as maintenance staff. Cleaning floors. Emptying trash. Maintaining storage rooms. But Isaac had often noticed something unusual about him. The janitor moved through the building as if he understood its rhythms better than the scientists who worked there. He arrived early. Left late. Spoke rarely. And when he did speak, his words carried a calm that felt strangely deliberate. Tonight the footsteps slowed near Isaac's office. The door remained open. The janitor paused just outside. His eyes moved toward the glowing screen. Toward the spiral. He said nothing at first. Isaac turned in his chair. "You're working late." The man nodded once. "Dust accumulates." Isaac glanced back at the screen. "I suppose it does." The janitor stepped closer. He studied the map quietly. Longer than Isaac expected. Finally he spoke. "You're tracing pressure." Isaac frowned slightly. "It's atmospheric modeling." The janitor shook his head gently. "Not only that." Isaac leaned back again. "You understand meteorology?" The man smiled faintly. "Pressure is pressure." Isaac crossed his arms. "That's a vague statement." The janitor's eyes remained on the spiral. "Air moves. Water moves. People move." Isaac waited. The man continued softly. "When pressure becomes uneven, something changes direction." Isaac turned fully toward him. "That's basic physics." The janitor nodded. "Yes. But the equations rarely include responsibility." Isaac stared at him. "You're suggesting human behavior influences environmental systems." "I'm suggesting they're part of the same system." The answer unsettled him. Because the spiral behind him suggested exactly that. But Isaac refused to accept the conclusion too quickly. Science required skepticism. He turned back toward the screen. "This pattern is coincidence. Most likely statistical clustering. Large datasets always produce anomalies." The janitor did not argue. He only asked a question. "Then why does the spiral continue?" Isaac hesitated. He did not have a quick answer. Because he had already tested that possibility. Removed several anomalies. Adjusted the filters. Changed the scale. The spiral weakened slightly. But it never vanished. The janitor rested one hand lightly against the doorframe. "Patterns don't appear suddenly." Isaac looked at him again. "What do you mean?" "They accumulate." The man turned to leave. His footsteps resumed their slow rhythm down the hallway. Isaac watched him disappear into shadow. Then he turned back toward the spiral. The map still glowed softly on the monitor. Dozens of moments across decades. Human decisions. Environmental shifts. Pressure redistributing across systems larger than any single event. Isaac leaned forward again. For the first time since beginning the analysis, he did not try to disprove the pattern. Instead he asked a new question. If the spiral existed, what kind of system produced it? Isaac did not go home that night. He rarely left unfinished analysis behind. But this time the reason was different. The spiral had changed something in the way he looked at data. Before tonight every dataset had been separate. Atmospheric pressure belonged to meteorology. Flood patterns belonged to hydrology. Wildfire behavior belonged to environmental science. Human decisions belonged to history. Now those categories felt artificial. The spiral connected them. And Isaac needed to understand how far that connection extended. The observatory archive stretched farther back than most people realized. Decades of climate monitoring. Paper logs from the early years before digital storage. Field notebooks written by meteorologists who had driven trucks through remote deserts to measure pressure with handheld instruments. Isaac unlocked the physical archive room near midnight. Fluorescent lights flickered briefly before stabilizing. Rows of metal cabinets lined the walls. Each drawer labeled with years. He began pulling them open one by one. Dust drifted through the air as he removed old logbooks. Most pages contained exactly what he expected. Wind speed. Temperature. Pressure. Humidity. Routine observations recorded by patient scientists. But Isaac had learned what to look for now. Moments where nature had behaved unexpectedly. Moments where direction changed suddenly. Moments where something moved before disaster could complete its path. He turned pages slowly. Hours passed unnoticed. Eventually he found the first one. A field log from 1964. Handwritten. Faded ink. A storm system forming over northern Arizona. Expected to move east. Instead it weakened abruptly. The note beside the data read, storm collapsed unexpectedly near Canyon Ridge. Hikers evacuated minutes earlier. Isaac marked the coordinate. He placed it on the spiral map. The point aligned perfectly with the previous arc. The pattern extended further back. Another log. Flash flood diverted into a dry ravine minutes before reaching a railway crossing. 3 trains passed safely that afternoon. Isaac plotted the coordinates. Again the spiral widened. Another arc. Further back in time. A third entry. Wildfire recorded in Northern California. High winds should have carried flames toward a small mining town. Instead the fire turned. Wind shifted unexpectedly. The official explanation cited unstable air pressure. But the field note included an additional sentence. Volunteer crews remained on ridge despite evacuation order. Isaac added the event to the map. The spiral deepened. Its rotation remained consistent. Slow. Measured. Turning across geography like a quiet clock. Isaac stepped back from the screen. The spiral now spanned nearly a century. Not random. Not accidental. A directional pattern built from moments when natural forces shifted just after human courage appeared. He felt a strange mixture of excitement and unease. Because science had no vocabulary for this kind of interaction. Nature did not reward morality. Atmospheric pressure did not observe human intention. Yet the spiral implied something close to that idea. Not reward. Not intervention. Response. Pressure moving through systems that included both environment and human behavior. Isaac whispered quietly. What are you? The question lingered in the room. He half expected the silence to remain empty. But footsteps appeared again in the hallway. Slow. Measured. The janitor returned. The man carried a small metal trash bin in one hand. He paused at the doorway and glanced toward the screen. The spiral filled nearly half the wall now. Isaac had projected the map larger to track the expanding pattern. The janitor studied it without surprise. "You kept digging," he said. Isaac did not look away from the map. "It goes back at least 100 years. "Yes." Isaac turned toward him. "You knew that?" The man shrugged. "Slightly. Patterns take patience." Isaac stepped closer. "You've seen this before." "Yes." "How?" The janitor set the trash bin quietly beside the door. He walked slowly into the office. His eyes followed the spiral across the wall. Not like someone seeing it for the first time. More like someone revisiting something familiar. "Pressure moves," he said calmly. Isaac exhaled sharply. "You said that already. And you ignored it." "I questioned it." The janitor nodded. "Questioning is good. Dismissing is easier." Isaac crossed his arms. "This spiral connects natural events to human choices. That violates basic scientific boundaries." The man looked at him. "Only if those boundaries are real." Isaac felt irritation rise. "They are real. They're necessary. Otherwise everything becomes speculation." The janitor considered the map again. Then spoke quietly. "Pressure is never wasted." Isaac frowned. "What does that mean?" "When pressure builds somewhere, it will eventually move." "That's obvious." "Yes. But movement doesn't always look like force." The janitor walked closer to the map. He pointed toward a section of the spiral. "These points. Storms changing direction. Floodwater diverting. Fires stopping." He traced the curve slowly. "They didn't stop randomly. They stopped because pressure had somewhere else to go." Isaac stared at the line of coordinates. "You're saying human decisions release pressure. I'm saying they redirect it." The room felt very quiet suddenly. Isaac thought about the events he had mapped. Rescue attempts. Warnings issued. Sacrifices made. Moments where someone had acted despite risk. Moments where responsibility altered a situation that might otherwise have collapsed. The janitor continued. "When people close themselves off, pressure builds. When they open, pressure moves." Isaac felt the spiral shift in his mind. Not visually. Conceptually. The pattern was not about preventing disasters. It was about redirecting them. Small decisions changing the path of larger forces. A river diverted. A storm weakened. A wildfire turning away. Each event connected to someone choosing alignment instead of avoidance. Isaac whispered again. "That's impossible." The janitor smiled faintly. "Yet here you are." Isaac turned back toward the map. The spiral stretched across decades. Across states. Across hundreds of individual lives. The pattern had never been obvious because no one had looked at all the systems together. Meteorologists studied storms. Hydrologists studied rivers. Emergency agencies recorded disasters. No one had combined those records with human decision points. Until now. Isaac felt something unsettling. Not fear. Awareness. The spiral had not stopped. The most recent event on the map had occurred only 3 months earlier. A wildfire stopping unexpectedly at the edge of a small town in Oregon. He zoomed further outward. The spiral's next arc pointed directly toward the desert region surrounding the observatory. Isaac felt his stomach tighten slightly. That means another event is coming. The janitor nodded. Yes. You sound certain. Pressure rarely waits forever. Isaac looked back at the map. If the pattern continues, it will happen somewhere near here. The janitor's expression remained calm. Most likely. Isaac's mind raced through possibilities. Storms. Flash floods. Wildfires. The desert rarely produced large disasters. But pressure could manifest in unexpected ways. He turned back toward the man. If this spiral is real, can it be predicted? The janitor shook his head gently. No, why not? Because the pattern doesn't start with nature. Isaac waited. It starts with people. The words settled slowly. Because they meant something Isaac had never considered. The spiral was not forecasting environmental events. It was mapping moral ones. Moments when human choices altered the direction of pressure. Moments when responsibility prevented collapse. Moments when alignment appeared. Isaac stared again at the map. The spiral did not look like coincidence anymore. It looked like history. A quiet record of decisions. A ledger written across storms, rivers, and mountains. A record no one had noticed until now. When Isaac turned again, the janitor had already left. The hallway stood empty. Only the faint hum of instruments remained. Isaac walked slowly back toward his desk. The spiral map filled the wall. And somewhere along its next arc, another decision waited. Another moment where pressure would build. And someone would have to choose what direction the world moved next. Isaac did not sleep. Once the possibility of the spiral became real, rest felt irresponsible. The observatory hummed quietly through the desert night. Air pressure monitors continued transmitting data. Satellite feeds updated automatically across the network. Most of the staff had gone home hours earlier. Only Isaac remained in the monitoring wing. And the spiral on the wall. He had expanded the dataset again. Now the map showed more than 90 events across a century. Storm deviations. Avalanche releases. Flood diversions. Wildfires halting unexpectedly at ridgelines. Each event small when viewed alone. Together they formed movement. The spiral curved across the continent like a slow-turning current. Isaac studied the most recent arc carefully. The last confirmed anomaly had occurred 3 months earlier. Northern Oregon. A wildfire that should have destroyed a rural community. Instead the wind shifted. The flames stopped at a natural firebreak. Official reports credited atmospheric instability. Fire crews called it luck. Isaac placed the coordinate onto the spiral. It fit exactly where the pattern predicted. That meant the next event should occur somewhere along the next curve. He zoomed the map again. Nevada. Utah. Northern Arizona. The desert surrounding the observatory sat near the predicted path. Isaac felt a faint tightening in his chest. Coincidence still remained possible. But the probability was shrinking. The first sign appeared at 2:14 a.m. One of the atmospheric pressure sensors registered a deviation. Small. Barely noticeable. Isaac almost ignored it. Pressure variations happened constantly. But this one lingered. Instead of dissipating, it strengthened slightly. He pulled the dataset onto the main screen. Pressure differential, 0.6 millibars. Still minor. Yet unusual for the calm desert conditions outside. Isaac checked the wind sensors. No gusts. No incoming storm systems. Satellite radar showed nothing forming across the region. The anomaly had no clear cause. He marked the reading. Then another sensor triggered. 5 miles west. A second pressure fluctuation. Small. But aligned with the first. Isaac leaned forward. 2 points did not create a pattern. But the line between them pointed directly toward the observatory valley. He overlaid the readings onto the spiral map. His breath slowed. The new point sat almost perfectly along the predicted arc outside the building. The desert wind had begun to move. Not violently. Just enough to stir loose sand against the metal structures. Isaac stepped outside briefly. Cold air spread across the valley floor. The sky remained perfectly clear. Stars burned sharply above the mountains. No clouds. No storm formations. Nothing that should explain the pressure change. He returned to the monitoring room. Another sensor activated. 10 miles south. The pressure differential grew. Still small. Still subtle. But forming a directional line. Isaac watched the data scroll across the screen. The anomalies were traveling. Not quickly. But deliberately. Moving across the desert toward the same central corridor. Isaac whispered to himself. This can't be atmospheric. He checked seismic sensors. Nothing. Checked satellite thermal readings. Nothing unusual. Checked local wind shear models. Still nothing. Nature offered no obvious explanation. Yet the pressure continued shifting. Footsteps appeared. In the hallway again. Isaac did not turn immediately. He already knew who it would be. The janitor entered quietly. His presence carried the same calm stillness as before. He looked toward the screens. You found the next one. Isaac finally turned toward him. You knew it would happen. Yes. How? The man studied the pressure readings. The spiral doesn't stop. Isaac gestured toward the monitors. These readings shouldn't exist. Atmospheric pressure doesn't move like this. The janitor nodded. Not by itself. Isaac felt frustration rising. Then what's causing it? The man leaned lightly against the doorway. Pressure builds in many places at once. In weather. In water. In people. Isaac remembered the earlier conversation. You're saying something is about to happen. Yes. What kind of event? That depends. On what? On the choice. The answer irritated Isaac. That's not helpful. The janitor's eyes moved back to the spiral map. It's accurate. The pressure anomalies continued shifting across the desert. Now 3 sensors registered the fluctuation. The pattern pointed toward a narrow canyon region east of the observatory. Isaac pulled up the regional terrain map. Dry washes cut through the canyon. During heavy rain those channels sometimes produced flash floods. But the weather forecast predicted clear skies for days. Isaac checked satellite imagery again. No storm systems anywhere near Nevada. Yet the pressure continued concentrating along the canyon corridor. Isaac suddenly remembered something. A construction crew had been working in that canyon. Expanding a highway tunnel through the rock face. If unstable pressure moved through the canyon walls, rock collapse could occur. A landslide. Isaac quickly accessed county construction reports. 3 teams scheduled on site tomorrow morning. Nearly 20 workers. The pressure readings intensified again. Now 4 sensors aligned along the canyon. The spiral map updated automatically. The new anomaly fit perfectly along the next arc. Isaac felt the realization settle heavily. The spiral was not predicting natural disasters. It was predicting moments when pressure reached a threshold. Moments where something could collapse. Unless someone changed direction. He looked at the janitor. If the canyon collapses tomorrow morning, people will be inside. The man nodded. Yes. Then we need to warn them. Isaac grabbed the phone. But the janitor spoke again. You could. Isaac paused. What do you mean? You could issue a warning based on incomplete data. That's not incomplete. It's unusual. Unusual isn't evidence. Isaac frowned. You're telling me not to call them? The janitor shook his head slowly. I'm telling you the spiral doesn't move because of numbers. It moves because someone chooses. Isaac stared at him. That's exactly what I'm doing. Yes. But you still haven't decided why. Isaac felt anger rising. People could die. Yes. And you're still thinking like a scientist. Isaac lowered the phone slowly. What does that mean? The janitor looked toward the spiral map again. The pattern doesn't form because people understand it. It forms because someone acts before they do. Isaac looked back toward the canyon coordinates. The pressure anomalies remained stable. A quiet line of data moving slowly across the desert sensors. If he called the construction office now, they might dismiss the warning. No storm forecast. No seismic risk. No geological indicators. Just atmospheric pressure readings. He imagined the conversation. Stop construction tomorrow because our observatory recorded a minor pressure anomaly. They would laugh. Or ignore him. Or ask for documentation he did not yet have. Time would pass. Morning would arrive. The workers would enter the canyon. And if the rock collapsed, the spiral would record another point. Isaac's mind raced. He could drive there himself. The canyon lay less than 40 miles east. He could arrive before sunrise. Speak directly with the crew. Convince them to delay work until the pressure stabilized. The janitor watched him silently. Isaac grabbed his keys. I'm going. The man nodded. Yes. Isaac paused briefly. Will it work? The janitor's expression softened slightly. The spiral never guarantees outcomes. It only measures choices. Isaac shut down the monitors quickly. The spiral remained glowing on the wall behind him. Another arc forming. Another moment approaching. Pressure was already moving. Now someone had to decide where it would go. Isaac ran toward the parking lot. The desert night stretched wide and silent around him. And somewhere in the dark canyon east of the observatory, the next turn of the spiral waited. The desert highway stretched endlessly beneath Isaac's headlights. Night in the Nevada desert carried a different kind of silence than the observatory. Out here the quiet felt larger. The sky opened wide above the empty land. Mountains stood like dark shapes against the horizon. Isaac drove faster than he normally allowed himself. The spiral map remained burned into his memory. Coordinates. Pressure readings. The line of sensors pointing toward the canyon construction site. 40 miles was not far. But time felt thinner than distance. If the pattern was real, something was building there. And the spiral did not wait for certainty. It waited for choice. The road curved toward the canyon entrance just before dawn. Construction lights flickered faintly ahead. Generators hummed. A few trucks sat parked near the tunnel mouth carved into the rock. Isaac slowed the car and pulled onto the gravel shoulder. Cold air rushed into the vehicle when he opened the door. The desert sky had begun to lighten slightly. The first gray line of morning touched the eastern horizon. Several workers stood near the tunnel entrance drinking coffee. They looked up when Isaac approached. One of them stepped forward. You lost? Isaac shook his head. No, I need you to stop work here this morning. The man frowned. We start drilling in an hour. Isaac gestured toward the canyon walls. There's pressure shifting through this corridor. The workers exchanged confused glances. Pressure, the foreman repeated. Isaac realized immediately how absurd it sounded. He forced himself to stay calm. I work at the Western Atmospheric Observatory. Our sensors detected unusual pressure movement through the canyon overnight. The foreman shrugged. We've got no seismic alerts. No storm forecast. Nothing unstable on the rock survey. Isaac nodded. I know. But I'm asking you to delay work for a few hours. The man crossed his arms. And if we don't? Isaac looked toward the canyon walls. The rock face rose steeply above the construction site. Massive layers of stone compressed over centuries. Pressure stored quietly in the mountain. I can't prove what's happening yet, Isaac said. But I've seen patterns like this before. The foreman sighed. You drove 40 miles to tell us you've got a feeling? Isaac almost answered no. Because it wasn't a feeling. It was a pattern. A pattern built across 100 years of small decisions. Moments where someone acted before pressure collapsed into disaster. But explaining that spiral to strangers before sunrise would sound insane. So he answered simply. Yes. The foreman studied him for a moment. Then he looked up at the canyon wall again. The wind moved softly through the rock corridor. Nothing looked unstable. Nothing looked dangerous. Yet the foreman had worked long enough to know something else. Experience sometimes whispers before evidence speaks. He turned back to the crew. Delay the drill schedule. 2 hours. Several workers groaned quietly. But none argued. The generators shut down. The site fell silent again. Isaac stepped back toward his car. The sky had brightened slightly. Morning approached. For several minutes nothing happened. The canyon remained still. The workers leaned against trucks drinking coffee. The foreman looked mildly irritated. Isaac wondered if he had made a fool of himself. The spiral could still be coincidence. Patterns sometimes appear where none exist. The human mind is good at creating meaning from chaos. Perhaps the pressure anomalies were meaningless fluctuations. Perhaps the canyon would remain quiet all day. Perhaps, a low cracking sound echoed through the canyon. Everyone turned instantly. The noise came from high above the tunnel entrance. A thin fracture appeared along the cliff face. Then another. Small pieces of rock broke loose first. Pebbles. Dust. The workers stepped backward instinctively. Then the mountain moved. A section of the upper ridge collapsed. Not a massive landslide. But large enough. Huge slabs of stone crashed onto the drilling platform where the crew had been scheduled to work minutes later. Dust exploded across the canyon floor. Rock fragments rolled toward the equipment. The sound echoed through the valley. Then silence returned. The workers stared at the rubble. The foreman slowly removed his hat. If we'd started drilling, he did not finish the sentence. No one needed him to. Isaac looked up toward the ridge. The rockfall had released pressure from a deep fracture line. Exactly the kind of geological shift that could remain invisible until the moment it collapsed. The spiral had reached another point. Not preventing disaster. Redirecting it. The foreman walked toward Isaac slowly. You said pressure was moving. Isaac nodded. Yes. The man looked at the shattered drilling platform. Well. He paused. You weren't wrong. The crew began clearing debris carefully. Work would not continue that morning. Safety inspections would follow. Engineers would analyze the fracture lines. Reports would explain the collapse. Geological pressure. Thermal expansion. Rock fatigue. All technically correct. But Isaac knew something else now. Pressure had moved. And someone had chosen to stand in its path long enough to redirect it. By the time Isaac returned to the observatory, the sun had fully risen. The desert looked calm again. The spiral map still covered the monitoring room wall. Isaac walked slowly toward it. A new coordinate had already appeared. The canyon rockfall. Time. Stamped. Logged automatically by the seismic sensors that recorded the collapse. He placed a small marker beside the event. Then he connected it to the previous arc. The spiral continued. One more turn. One more decision recorded across geography. Isaac stepped back. The pattern now stretched across more than a century. Storms. Floods. Wildfires. Avalanches. And now a desert canyon collapse. Each event tied to a moment where someone chose responsibility before certainty. The spiral was not a prediction. It was a record. A ledger of alignment. Footsteps sounded again behind him. Isaac did not turn immediately. He already knew who it was. The janitor stopped beside the doorway. His eyes moved toward the newest point on the spiral. It continued, he said quietly. Isaac nodded. Yes. The man studied the map for a long moment. Then he spoke again. It always does. Isaac finally turned toward him. What is this pattern? The janitor considered the question carefully. Balance, he said. That's not specific. It isn't supposed to be. Isaac looked back at the spiral. Why does it exist? The man's faint smile returned. Because pressure never disappears. It only waits for direction. Isaac thought about the canyon. About the foreman agreeing to delay work. About the workers stepping away moments before the rockfall. A small decision. A small delay. Yet the spiral had moved because of it. Isaac looked back at the janitor. And you? What about me? You've seen this pattern before. Yes. Why are you here? The janitor paused. Then answered softly. Someone has to notice. Before Isaac could respond, the man turned and walked down the hallway. His footsteps faded slowly. The observatory returned to quiet. Isaac looked once more at the spiral. The pattern had not ended. It had simply moved forward. Another arc forming. Another moment waiting somewhere in the world. Because in forgotten places, where patterns hide in plain sight, justice does not shout. It whispers. And every act leaves an echo. You have been listening to Whispers of Reckoning. Patterns do not appear suddenly. They accumulate. Choice by choice. Until the world responds. Every act leaves an echo.